Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Bigger on the Inside, the new Who Doctor Who Watch On podcast. First of all, let me apologise if this first little clip of audio isn't as high quality as it normally would be. It'll be all back to normal in about 20 seconds. I'm just here to introduce you to Coupe, who I did an interview with. He is a freelance videographer and has worked quite a lot with Big Finish, and very recently with Christopher Eccleston ahead of his Ninth Doctor audio adventures. So stick around for us to talk about that, and I'll catch you at the end. I'll see you in a bit.
So I think the best way to start would be if you could explain to the listeners what your job title or job role actually is. Because when we spoke on Twitter, I loved it, but I was also couldn't fully grasp every single thing you did. So for everybody listening, how would you describe your role?
Well, I suppose I'm a freelance videographer. That's my main role. So basically, I work with Big Finish Productions. We've worked together a few times over the last, I suppose it's a year and a half now. And whenever they have produced a promo video or interviews, which is live action, I have been responsible for that.
Yeah, so cool. How does that come around then? Were you spotted by Big Finish, or did they have a role available that you applied for?
It wasn't a application as such. I sort of got in touch with the marketing team not long. Well, I came along at the right time. They were looking for someone like me, and
Yeah,
I happened to be talking with them around the same time. And then a project came up not long after that, which was the Attagirl 2 promo video.
mm.
So that was my first one to film. Went along to the studio, and they obviously liked what I could
Yeah,
produce. And I was invited back to do a second one before the first one was released, because Attagirl 2 was my second video out, I think. There was
yeah,
another one before that, which was the Sylvester and Sophie Q&A,
yeah.
Seventh Doctor and Ace.
Yeah, I want to get to that video later on because I've got some
Yeah.
questions about hanging around with Sylvester that I'm sure you'll be able to indulge me with. You said there that
Yeah.
you sort of approached them, so were you already aware of what they were doing? Were you a fan of the audio adventures?
Yeah. Um, I've been a Doctor Who fan for, oh, I don't know, so many years now. I think it was 2007. I think my first series was, 10th Doctor and Martha.
Yeah.
But I first heard a Big Finish around the 50th anniversary.
Mm.
It was the light at the end. The promo for that was quite prominent, relatively, like on Twitter and things. So I came across that, and that was one of my first purchases.
Yeah.
Um, and then I slowly built up my collection over the years, and then it got to the point where I thought, I think I'm good enough to put
Yeah.
my name out there to them, and it turned out to have paid off.
Nice one. Yeah. Obviously, we've been talking on Twitter, and I did go back and I watched your interviews and stuff. And there's
Hmm.
how does what is the process behind one of those? Because are you just in charge of the setup, or are you asking the questions as well?
Well, it does depend on individual projects. So if it's if it's one where there's just one person talking slightly off camera,
Yeah.
I will usually be allowed to initially lead the interview. So I'll come up with my own questions because that's the experience I did bring to the role. Um, so a good example of that would be Raki Thakra, the Bliss interview. That was kind of recent. So I initially asked the first lot of questions, but then usually the producer of the series will be there with me. And if there's anything they think I've missed or anything interesting that they know about the series that I don't,
Yeah.
then they will jump in with their own questions at the end.
Yeah. I suppose it's quite hard then not to not to say that you would fanboy, but to go ask all the questions you want to ask, and then there's a producer on the side going, you haven't actually asked anything that we can use properly.
Yeah,
How
I
much?
suppose that was
Sorry,
probably
go
a
on.
worry on their part.
Yeah.
That was probably a worry on their part that when they first allowed this fan into the studio, that I could have just gone crazy, and
Yeah.
but I've managed to maintain my composure.
Yeah. We've spoken to a few people who've worked with Big Finish, and they always say that there's quite a lot of people working there, but it's very tight knit, and it does feel very family orientated. And once you're in that sort of Big Finish circle, it's a very loyal sort of group of people. You're not gonna, you know what I'm trying to say. You don't feel like you're gonna get swapped out very often, or
Yeah, that's probably how it does feel. Like there is a lot of time in each recording to sit in the green room and chat. Even when it's a big production, odds are not everyone is recording at the same time. So there's always 2 or 3 actors.
Yeah.
And the producer, you will usually be around as well. So there's always just chatting going on throughout the day. So it really does feel like a nice family when you are there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much of these projects do you know about whilst you're interviewing people? Because I imagine sometimes they've just come out of a recording studio and it isn't properly edited. And you've just interviewed them whilst they're at the location. So how does that work for you?
Yeah. So sometimes I'll well, if it's an established series, it's probably assumed that I know enough to go in without any prep.
Yeah.
Like any Doctor Who ones, really. But I did the promo video for the Human Frontier, the Nick Briggs original idea, and that's obviously totally new. So for that one, I was given the script for the whole series, and I read through the whole thing. And normally I don't like reading that much. That's why audio stories appeal to me. I struggle to sit down and read. But this, I literally couldn't put it down. So I just made notes for the characters. For when I'd met the actors, I'd be able to ask them questions about their characters and Nick himself. But usually I don't know too much other than what came before that.
Yeah.
For like a Doctor Who series, I would know what's happened until that point. So I come up with questions based on that, really.
Yeah. When is Nick Briggs' new sci-fi thing? When's that coming out? Because I keep seeing it circulating online. Is it already out now? Or
the first series, it came out last August, I think it was, and there will be a second series later this year. I think it's scheduled for, unless it got delayed for COVID.
Oh, I can't keep track anymore.
I think it's coming out this year, the second series, but the first series is out and it's really good.
Yeah. You touched on it earlier. You mentioned your interview with Sophie and Sylvester. I've met Sylvester once or twice, and every time I've met him, he's just been exactly how you would expect with the spoons and the hat. He's a great guy. How is it then? But that was at just little interviews and things like that. How is that in like a professional capacity when you're trying to conduct interviews and stuff? I imagine he's just amazing fun.
Yes, he was quite a lot of energy. And I was there for the recording of, it was The Flying Dutchman in the monthly range. So that was quite a high energy pirate based story. So he had a lot of energy and had some cool anecdotes about the origin of the accents that the pirates use as well.
Oh, nice.
And he did have his spoons for that. I'm not sure if he knew about the video and that's why he bought them or not. But he did, he had some spoons in the studio. So he is exactly as you would expect, I'd say.
Oh, that's great. And going from Sylvester, you've recently been, and I've got to ask, you've recently been hanging around in the studio with Christopher Eccleston. I'm right with that, aren't I?
Yes.
And
right.
I'm not going to push you on story things or anything you might have heard because it's so tempting and I've got goosebumps even thinking about what I could push you to answer. But all I will answer is, you've already said you're a Doctor Who fan, and I know a few fans would probably give an awful lot to be hanging around in that studio. Yes. There must be a huge sense of privilege and excitement when you're sat there and you can you hear him when he's doing his lines, or can you just see him from a different room?
Yes, I heard the recording, and it was incredibly exciting. Probably the most exciting day I've had for that reason, because you when you meet Sylvester McCoy, you know a lot of fans have people like him and Paul, but not many fans have met Chris.
Yeah.
So it was very exciting because of that, and it was also the most. I was also the most nervous before that day as well, because he hasn't played the role for 16 years, and in that time there's been a lot of rumor as to why that might be, and not all of them make him look good. So there was a worry, like maybe he's not. It would be quite scary to meet in person. So he was actually so friendly, and that's probably what surprised me the most.
Yeah.
because I was started shooting the B-roll and shots before I had a chance to meet him because he was already in the recording thing. So the first thing I said to him was, "Sorry, do you mind if I'm filming this?" Because I was shooting through the glass, so he couldn't object at the time. And he was like, "Oh yeah, no, absolutely, please go ahead." And he was overwhelmingly friendly. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I recently read his interview with the Doctor Who magazine talking about returning to Big Finish, and he generally just seemed like, because I think he has an image, or people have an image of him that he's this tough northern guy, no bullshit sort of, I'll do what I want sort of thing. But from reading interviews, and if you actually read the stuff he says rather than secondhand report and talk to yourself, he just generally just seemed like a lovely guy, and he has time in the world for everything, and he's just very dedicated to his work.
Yeah, that's him. So friendly. I mean, the tough edge. You can definitely tell it's there. The Ninth Doctor is there within him. But yes, so nice to be with. I couldn't believe it.
So when do you think people will be able to see that footage that you filmed?
Whenever I do a video, it usually coincides with the release of the series. So the Ravagers 1 is coming out in May, I think. So that is when that video will be out.
Oh,
I'm not sure if it's coming out on the day of release or if it's going to be a few days before, but it will be alongside the first volume.
Yeah, and is that B-roll plus interview stuff that you get to shoot as well?
For that video, it will just be the Chris talking all the way through, I think.
Okay.
There was some people shot which might be used for something else.
Oh, I won't.
But,
don't do
yeah.
it, Joe. I've just got so many questions now.
The May video will just be Chris.
Yeah. For anybody who wants to get into this line of work, as a well, I don't know if you know, I work as a freelance photographer as well. So it can be sometimes getting those contacts can be tricky. For people who want to enter that sphere of work, what advice would you give for them?
Well, probably my main advice is probably to be brave, and cause that's what I did. I put my name. I got in touch first. You have to be willing to get in touch with people that you want to work with.
Yeah.
Just send an email to someone.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, you can't take that personally. They probably already have someone. You just have to move on to the next.
Yeah.
Don't let it put you down.
Yeah, I always find that a lot of people maybe waiting to be found. You know, they're sort of waiting for someone to approach them. But you've really got to start by emailing around and just being basically a pest.
Especially in the Doctor Who world, there's on Twitter you see there are so many talented Doctor Who fans and so many fan films and their own audio things, and every Doctor Who fan I think has got that sort of it seems a creative flair somewhere because of the show.
Yeah. There's a lot of people out there with the biggest portfolios, and in about 5 years, there's going to be a lot of clashing heads.
Yeah, and fan cover arts are one of my favourite things,
great.
Especially for stories that don't already have one. Those sort of things are always amazing to see.
Do you get approached a lot by fans then to sort of go, "Oh, have you seen this work?" Or because Doctor sound horrible, or it wasn't until this Christopher Eccleston thing came around that I saw your tweet and I was like, "Oh, cool."
Yeah, I've normally found that not many people seem to know that I am involved with Big Finish. Like certainly my friends are, but I think the average person on Twitter definitely not. I don't think. So every now and then there will be someone that's following me for a little while and go, "Oh, I didn't know that you did this." It's half of what I tweet about really. So I'm not sure why, but so I'm not sure how I can fix that, but
I'll make sure I link all your
social
media stuff in the bottom because people have to go follow. Because when I saw that picture, I was like, "Oh, I've got to get Joe on. We got to get him on." There's so many questions instantly. So one thing that sort of came up throughout the last 12 months that I think a lot of people caught attention of was the Big Finish lockdown video with Nick Briggs and everybody sort of working from home. How was that, and what was your involvement working within that?
Yeah, so that one, sort of came about quite early on in the lockdown. I think it was before they'd released any of their lockdown stories, and obviously, therefore, fans hadn't heard the quality of the recording at that point. So they wanted a way to reassure the people that were saying it's not going to be as good. So I was on a Zoom call during one of the recordings. It was for the Doomsday contract that came out sort of recently, the Fourth Doctor Lost story. So for that, I did get to interview Lala Ward, which was quite nice. She was lovely, but in Singapore, I think it was, remotely. So people like her and Chris Naylor, I think, was also there. I would ask them the questions in the normal fashion as if I was there in person. But then there was people that I did just send a message to and say, do you want to be involved in this video? And they sort of knew what to... They asked their own questions, basically. That was people like Scott Hancock, and Benji Clifford. They sent in their own video contributions without much direction from me.
Yeah.
And then I went through all the footage and chose a narrative order for it. So you can see it goes from the initial problems to how they miss the studio and things like that.
How's it been then for you working through lockdown then? Because as somebody who would normally be in the studio, they're no longer in the studio. So it must have been tricky.
Well, initially it was, I still had a steady stream of work with Big Finish because there was a backlog of videos that was filmed before I joined, but for series that were about to be released, like the first Doctor interviews with
David Bradley.
Oh, David Bradley, of course.
Yeah.
And those kind. So that came out last year, but it was filmed before I joined. So I was given that interview and just edited it as if I'd filmed it.
Okay.
There was quite a few of those. The Paternoster Gang was another, and Star Cops. And then I also was involved in the Big Finish virtual day. But that was mostly, again, just editing footage that was given to me. It wasn't until the Chris Eccleston that I was back in the studio for the first time.
That's a daunting way to return.
Yeah, so it was, yes, very. And it was about exactly a year, I think, from the last time I had been in the studio. So it was...
Everything's slowly coming back to normal, so
Yeah.
hopefully we'll get a few more
Yeah.
in-studio stuff. It must be nice, though, being back in the studio, because I imagine that's where it's almost like the home, really, of Big... Well, it is the home of Big Finish, so...
Yeah, and it's not the same as it was, because there's only the people that does have to be there that can't do it remotely. So the director was remote, for example, and producer, so I didn't exactly get a big reunion. I just turned up with my camera and filmed Chris, who was one of about 3 people who was there that day. So it's not exactly the same, but it was still very nice being back in the actual studio.
How many people are normally there then? Before COVID, what would not a normal studio be like?
For a shoot, I think maybe 10 people being there is probably a good figure, because you've got a director, producer, and then the handful of cast, the sound engineer as well.
Yeah.
So it does get quite busy in the green room.
Yeah.
It's a lot of chatting.
We spoke with Miranda Raisin from some of the Sixth Doctor Big Finish way. And she mentioned that one of her favourite things is that, I can't remember the name, escapes me, but someone will bring in like their homemade curries and their homemade food, and basically everybody will dish in, and so it really does have that sort of like just a really lovely family vibe, and I think that does come across.
Yeah, especially at the Moat Studios, which I think I've seen pictures of Miranda recording there, so that's probably what she's talking about. It's the owner, Toby, he's the one responsible for the famous Big Finish lunches. And he literally, I don't know if he prepares it beforehand, I assume he does. And then, so at lunchtime, he takes his break from recording to do the final prep of his lunch, and then brings it out for all the cast. It's not what I expected at all.
And there you have it. That was my little chat there with Joe, who is a freelance videographer for Big Finish. Really interesting stuff there. A lot of fun behind the scenes Big Finish stuff. for those interested, we will be talking about those Knife Doctor audio adventures when they do release. We're not sure how we're going to format that yet, but it will be great fun. So make sure you head over to the Big Finish website and pre-order yours. This video isn't sponsored, by the way. But yeah, go check it out. Check out our other interviews that we've done. Again, apologies for this weird audio that's back-ending the episode, but I'm sure you understand. All the best. Subscribe.